Good morning to everyone and welcome wherever you happen to be joining us from around the Hemisphere. We're so pleased to be back for the second day of ACLA's forecast on Latin America and the Caribbean Conference. If you joined us yesterday, you heard U.S. Chamber EVP and Head of International Myron Brilliant provide an outlook on global trade, placing particular emphasis on the issues we're tracking around our hemisphere. We were also able to hear from executives of two of our leadership circle companies leading in the sustainability space, CHEP and Cargill, about priorities for the private sector heading into COP26 in Glasgow and beyond. We were honored to host President Cortizo of Panama, who detailed the ways in which Panama is leading on issues like climate and migration, while also positioning itself as a nearshoring destination of choice. We were joined by a key voice in the U.S. Congress, Chairman of the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee, Albiocides, to learn more about what the Hill is doing to address challenges to inclusive economic growth in our region. And we concluded the day by hearing from experts at UPS and Flexport about perhaps the most vexing current trade challenge we're all facing, ongoing global supply chain disruption. I'd say that's a pretty tough agenda to match, but today we're sure going to try. We'll have the privilege of receiving another presidential keynote address, this one from new Peruvian President Jose Pedro Castillo. We'll also do a spotlight on trade in Central America and the Caribbean. We'll hear from our friends at IBC Bank about developments along the US-Mexico border. We get the opportunity to hear from another Capitol Hill leader when we're joined by Congressman Mark Greene. Mauricio Ramos, CEO of leadership circle company Millicom, joins us to share his thoughts on the status of digital transformation in the region. An imperative to advancing digital transformation is ensuring sound cybersecurity. So we'll also have the chance to listen to two subject matter experts in that critical field. And we'll also have the opportunity to hear from Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy and Environment, Jose Fernandez, about Biden administration's strategy to reactivate growth across the region. Sounds pretty great, right? Well, it wouldn't be possible without some really important people. So I first want to thank the ACLA Secretariat, Anne, Isabel, and Maximiliano for their tireless work in putting together this agenda. Also, I need to thank our tireless AV and production team that works around the clock to make these events possible. And thank you also to our leadership circle companies without whose support this programming for ACLA and our policy agenda wouldn't be possible. And last, but certainly not least, a very hearty congratulations to our brand new ACLA chair, Luis Laguerre of Panama, and also our deep thanks to outgoing chair, Jose Luis Sanchez of AmCham Colombia for 2 outstanding years. With that, we're excited to kick off FOLAC Day 2 with an interview of one of ACLA's very own. Reina Mejia is helping lead the great work of the Inter-American Development Bank as its executive vice president, but many of you will remember Reina from her time as an ACLA board member and president of AmCham Honduras. I'm pleased now to turn it over to ACLA EVP Anne McKinney, who sits down with Reina to discuss all that IDB is doing to address pandemic recovery and drive sustainable growth across the region. Anne?
Neil, thank you for your introduction. I'm very pleased to welcome Reina Mejia, Executive Vice President of the Inter-American Development Bank. Reina oversees the operations of the bank and brings a wealth of private sector experience, having spent nearly 25 years at Citibank Honduras, serving as President and CEO and Head of Global and Corporate Banking. She also was active on a number of corporate and nonprofit boards, including AmCham Honduras and our own ACLA governing board. Reina, it's wonderful to be with you today. Reflecting on your prior experience as president of AmCham Honduras, what role can platforms like AmCham's play in the region, specifically in the context of this historic time of post-pandemic regional recovery?
Thank you, Anne. I'm very pleased and honored to be here. I am really excited to be part of this event, and I cherish my memories with AmCham, where I met fabulous business leaders, and I got to see firsthand what we can accomplish on the ground. These are no doubt challenging times for the region, but also times in which opportunity flourishes. The right of mixed resources, innovation, entrepreneurship, and smart policies can pave the way for a strong recovery premised on sustainable, resilience, and inclusive growth. And I truly believe platforms like AmCham can play a critical role in helping reactivate the economy, leverage on AmCham's unique strength in areas that are so crucial for the region's recovery, such as attracting foreign investment, promoting trade facilitation, advocating for the rule of law, and deepening partnership cooperation between the United States and the Latin American countries and the Caribbean. If we want to turn this crisis into opportunities, multilateral organizations like the IDB should capitalize on the experience and expertise of AmCham's network of more than 20,000 member companies. These are companies that have been doing business in the region, and they've been working with governments and several institutions in the ground for many years.
Thank you, Reina. We certainly agree that AmChams have an important role to play. Although we're seeing a global economic recovery, progress is uneven, and the pandemic and other risks remain important factors. Could you share with us the IDB's economic outlook for the Latin American Caribbean region?
Prior to the pandemic, and the region was already struggling and lagging productivity, social inequalities, fiscal pressures, and social unrest. COVID-19 has aggravated the situation and has highlighted the need for implementing deep structural changes. Despite that and the low vaccination level remaining in some countries, Latin American growth is expected to rebound in 2021, given the positive global conditions. In fact, according to the IMF's report around 2 weeks ago, the region is expected to grow around 6.3% this year, compared to 5.9% of the expected global growth. Although economic recovery is underway, unemployment remains at more than 2 percentage points higher than in 2019. This is affecting particularly women and poor households who were hit harder by the pandemic. And interestingly, and I want to mention this strongly, earnings of small and medium companies have recovered faster than those of larger firms, despite having fallen more in 2020. This is due to a greater flexibility of SMEs and the emergence of new companies in the market through 2021. Also, digital payments has exploded this year, replacing many transactions that were previously done in person, opening a new window of opportunities for financial inclusion. For instance, in Colombia, the creation of cash transfer programs during the pandemic encouraged 1.6 million people to open a bank account in 2020. Isn't that amazing? At the IDB, the crisis prompted us to rethink how we can best support our countries moving forward. Therefore, we developed Vision 2025. This is the IDB Group's blueprint to accelerate sustainable and inclusive growth for the post-pandemic recovery in the region. We believe that investing in sustainable solutions represents a win-win approach as it reduces climate risk while boosting economic growth.
Thank you, Reina. In the context that you've laid out, and with many challenges ahead, what would you identify as concrete opportunities for doing business in the region?
First, the US and Latin America and the Caribbean are key trade partners. In 2020, despite the COVID-19 shock, the US exported $467 billion in goods and services to the region. Few realize that this represents 22% of the total US exports. Yes, 22% of the total. That is more what the United States export to the European Union and nearly 3 times its export to China. Second, our partnership with the United States is so relevant that our countries are the number 1 and the number 2 most important export markets for 37 states. Most of what they sell is a highly value-added, such as machineries, financial services, electrical equipment, computers, and higher education. There is no doubt, Anne, that the region offers a huge opportunity for U.S. companies. The bank has been looking closely at opportunities associated with strengthened regional value chains, which is one of our key pillars of our Vision 2025, Reinvest in the Americas.
Reina, thank you for highlighting those important statistics about the trade relationship between the United States and Latin America and the Caribbean. Can you provide us some concrete examples of those opportunities?
Sure. Let me share some exciting examples of both short-term and medium-term opportunities. In Jamaica, we see opportunities for business and knowledge processes outsourcing over the short term, while in the medium term, warehousing and manufacturing distribution services have potential. Meanwhile, in Honduras, my country, textile, light manufacturing, and call centers are attracting investments as value chains are shifting. Further south in Uruguay, and they have become a software development and audiovisual services hub. We foresee great potential in pharmaceuticals, shared services centers, medical devices, and biotechnology. Colombia has comparative advantage in electrical equipment and auto parts sectors in the medium term. As you can see, these are just few opportunities. These opportunities are significant. The most important is that they involve high value added goods and services. And this is critical, Anne.
We know that the IDB is working on an agenda to accelerate recovery and sustainable growth. Can you tell us why attracting investment and regional integration are key elements of this agenda?
Yes, Anne. The region has not fully realized the benefit of a stronger regional economic integration, mostly because just a small number of firms are participating in global value chains, and these take part in the initial stages. Still, exporting raw materials that are later processed in other countries. Furthermore, according to 2020 Gartner survey, more than a third of 260 leading global companies are planning to shift their supply chains to alternate suppliers in the coming years. That's a great opportunity. As global value chains are reconfigured, this is one in a lifetime opportunity for our countries and for the business. And I can mention 3 reasons for this. First, their increasing participation in global value chains will boost productivity by allowing countries to focus on sectors and stages of production in which they already enjoy comparative advantages and benefit from technology and knowledge transfer. Second, it will help create more and better jobs through increased export, higher demand for skilled workers, and more employment opportunity for women. And third, this is a global opportunity when it comes to climate change mitigation and adaptation. Bringing value change closer to markets will increase environmental sustainability and reduce carbon footprint. The good news, Anne, is that our countries are already capitalizing on this trend. For example, during the pandemic, IBM opened its largest process transformation center in Bogota. And just this past July, Intel announced it would invest more than $600 million in Costa Rica to manufacture microchips. And these are just a few examples.
What are your insights on what government should do to provide the conditions to improve the business climate and improve economic productivity and growth?
We all know that business and investment climate is crucial for economic growth. But we also know that investment climate that facilitates resilience and inclusive recovery in the region won't happen spontaneously. To take advantage of these opportunities, our countries need to make conscious and coordinated efforts. The IDB is truly committed to support them in 3 areas. First, investment promoting and financing. Second, infrastructure and logistics services improvement to reduce trade and connectivity costs. And third, harmonizing of trade agreements and regulations and funding devoted to anti-corruption and pro-transparency projects. I am not sure if our audience knows, but The IDB is the main provider of technical assistance to our region for ensuring compliance with the Financial Action Task Force on combating money laundering and the financing of terrorism. And these are the projects that won't necessarily generate headlines, but they do generate critical reforms. We also know that a business climate should be premised on an environment of anti-corruption and transparency. These include an environment where there are accountable institutions, security and certainty for investors, and solid regulatory frameworks. Along with attracting investments, countries need to pay as much attention to small and medium local businesses, as these constitute over 90% of firms in the region and generate 61% of employment. Last but not least, no integration agenda will be complete without ensuring that MSMEs, owned or led by women, indigenous people, and African descendants, all benefits equally from strengthening regional value chains.
Reina, climate change is another important global challenge affecting the region. We are less than 2 weeks away from the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26. What does COP26 mean for the region, and what opportunities for green investment and financing are available, for instance, on low-carbon projects?
Our role as the region leading development bank is to help our countries mitigate and adapt to the risk and help them seize the unique moment to rebuild sustainable by creating opportunities for green jobs and green growth. The private sector is crucial in this endeavor. We believe that with the right fiscal policies, the decarbonization of our economy can create 15 million net jobs by 2030 in areas such as plant-based food production, renewable energy, construction, and manufacturing. And every dollar investing in making infrastructure and economies more resilient can generate up to $4 in economic benefits. Dear friends, don't forget that this evidence is clear. Climate action is business friendly. As we head into COP26, the IDB has also led a joint effort with all multilateral development banks to mainstream nature in our operations and strategy. For example, just 2 weeks ago, the Green Climate Fund approved a new $600 million Amazon bioeconomy facility that will be one of the core financing instruments for our Amazonia initiative launched by our President Claver Caron in March this year. And the IDB Group is committed to climate financing. For example, between 2020 and 2023, we are ensuring around $5 billion in annual support to climate action. We have also started to process the aligning of our operations to the Paris Agreement objective. And going back to your original questions, and one concrete result our countries can hope for in Glasgow is the clear definition of the guidelines for carbon markets. Of course, our country are also in need of more financing and technology transfer to help them build resilience in the face of worsening climate impact. So on the road to Glasgow, we are working in various fronts to unlock critical climate finance and drive the sustainable recovery for our region, and our people need it.
Reina, our member companies are committed to being good partners. In closing, Reina, what would you say is the role of multilaterals, the public sector, and the private sector to help the region recover and rebound from this devastating pandemic?
Yes, and as we emerge from this crisis, I think it's important to reflect on what we have learned. The partnership that we have forged to face COVID-19 demonstrated that concrete actions can be implemented in an agile manner and in a very efficient way, where before pandemic could have required months or even years of planning. Partnerships are essential approach to develop in the post-pandemic world. The public-private multilateral triad is more relevant now and more urgent. This intersection is where the public sector, multilaterals, and private sector work together. I call it, this is where the magic happens, because this is how we can accomplish goals that otherwise would be unattainable independently. We have to work together. We can capitalize on the strength, expertise, and resources of public and private sector's partners to accelerate the region's recovery and growth in a way that achieves new levels of innovations and collaboration. Multilateralism is reinvigorating itself by necessity. We must use the trust and momentum generated by the pandemic to tackle even more complex issues like climate change. In sum, we have big challenges ahead, and multilaterals like the IDB, along with government and private sectors like AmCham, must continue working together and deepen the cooperation as we navigate these uncharted waters. I am convinced that we are laying the ground to helping the region achieve a sustainable and resilient recovery and a return to growth in a way that leaves no one behind. Thank you, Anne, for this conversation. I really enjoyed it talking to you. I still feel part of AmCham's family and look forward to our continued partnership.
Thank you so much, Reina. We're so happy to have you as part of the AmCham family and really appreciate you sharing your insights with us today. We agree that now is the time for new partnerships, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you and your colleagues at the Inter-American Development Bank. Thank you again.
Reina and Anne, thank you for a fantastic armchair discussion. Reina, we agree that our AmChams can play a pivotal role in the region's recovery by attracting FDI, promoting trade facilitation, and advocating for the adherence of the rule of law. Your comments on reconfiguring global supply chains and the potential benefits for the region are something we are keeping a close eye on. Before we continue with our program, I want to invite you to follow us on Twitter and share your thoughts on yesterday and today's discussion. Without your contribution, we don't know if we're going in the right direction, and we want to be able to hear from you and be able to continue this conversation after the conference as well. And now pivoting back to the program, as Reina mentioned, technology and digitization are areas of potential growth in the region. And especially one of these is cybersecurity. A couple of years ago, this was still in its infancy stage, barely being discussed. With the new drive of the digital world, it has now been brought to the forefront of what we can do and what we should do. But there is still so much we don't know. Our next segment highlights the importance of cybersecurity in a digitized hemisphere. Here to ground that conversation are representatives from the Inter-American Development Bank and Fortinet. The segment will be led by my colleague, Abel Torres, Senior Director for the Chamber's Center for Global Regulatory Cooperation. Abel works with our companies and leads the Chamber's cyber initiatives across the globe. Abel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabel, for that kind introduction. Hello, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Abel Torres. As Isabel said, I am the Senior Director for the Center for Global Regulatory Cooperation here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and I co-lead Project Security within the Chamber's International Affairs Division. Project Security advocates for a flexible, risk-based approach to cybersecurity that leverages international standards, enabling the private sector to develop solutions that address specific cyber needs and scale them across national borders. Even before the start of the global pandemic, public and private sectors faced an already challenging and dynamic environment as they sought to protect their institutions from cyber attacks. And to do this without degrading their ability to innovate and extract value from the technology investments that were under attack. You fast forward nearly 2 years, and it's clear that the pandemic has sped up the adoption of digital technologies by several years. Businesses, peoples, organizations, governments of all sizes are investing in digital capabilities, and countries are pledging vast resources. As society becomes more digital, threats rapidly evolve and are increasing in scale, they're increasing in frequency, complexity, and consequence. managing cybersecurity, especially with regard to critical infrastructure, is vital to the economic and national security. In this session, we will discuss the importance of cybersecurity in an increasingly digitized world, and our panelists will aim to explore aspects of the following four elements. First, the importance of cybersecurity and efforts aimed at increasing alignment around cybersecurity rules of responsible behavior in cyberspace. Second, current status of rules-based order that is reflective of the changing geopolitical and digital landscape. Third, the roles of both public and private sectors. And fourth, the need for nations to understand the potential outcomes of their actions in cyberspace, to include the concepts of proportional response and consequences of malign activities. To help us discuss these issues, we are joined by two experts in the field. Santiago Paz, he is the sectorial specialist on cybersecurity at the Inter-American Development Bank. We are also joined by Arturo Torres, who is a security strategist for Latin America and the Caribbean at Fortinet. Welcome, and thank you both for being part of this discussion. I'm very excited to have you both. We are quite grateful for you to be here. Let's just go ahead and dive into this panel discussion. And it seems the obvious first question really stems straight from the panel title, the importance of cybersecurity in a digitized hemisphere. Why is cybersecurity important in a digitized hemisphere? Santiago, let's start with you.
Okay, thank you very much, Abel. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. And digital transformation for the Hemisphere. As was mentioned before, in the Vision 2025 of the IDB, one of the short-term recommended action for economic recovery is digitalization. And it's because of digital, and it's thanks to digital transformation that we could continue our life during pandemic. We could have telemedicine, we could have education online, we could teleworking. And digitalization is really, really important. But as you mentioned, once you digitalize your business, you are also increasing the surface of exposure of your business. And that is when cybersecurity risk appears. And it's necessary to manage that risk to be able to enjoy the opportunities that digitalization produces. It's very important to understand that cybersecurity is not just a matter of technology. It's not enough to deploy some firewalls or antivirus in the network. You need to have organization, institutions, policies, regulatory frameworks, technology, infrastructure, and from my point of view, the most important, you have to put their people. The people are the key here. The people in the last year, because of the pandemic, we experimented a transformation, a huge transformation of our way of life. And we need to understand this new digitalized life that has some risk, and we need to just manage that risk. And it's because of that cybersecurity is key for digital transformation. If you don't include cybersecurity in your strategy, you're gonna increase so much the risk that maybe it doesn't worth enough to make the digital transformation.
Santiago, thank you. You brought up quite a few elements that we look forward to discussing later in the programming. Arturo, welcome your remarks.
Yeah, this is totally makes sense because we need to understand that the data and the information right now, this is the field for the digital economy in every industry and for every business. So if we understand what kind of information we manage on our business, we can create a strategy, cybersecurity strategy to protect all those information, and of course, protect all our customers and using intelligence and all that stuff, right?
Thank you, Arturo. We briefly mentioned earlier around the digital transformation, and like digital transformation, cyber attacks are also transforming and they're also constantly evolving. And the use of ransomware, for example, has increased to extort businesses This is I think this is very popular today. You may think about the Colonial Pipeline attack. That comes immediately to mind because it's only been less than a year since that and impacted society quite extensively here in the US. Ransomware is a persistent and rapidly growing scourge on critical infrastructure. Ransomware is widely seen as a significant challenge and a threat to organizations. Arturo, there was a recent semi-annual FortiGuard Global Threat Landscape report. It indicated that wide-scale attacks that spread to impact numerous organizations and countless individuals has become a regular occurrence. The report showed a 10-fold increase in ransomware attack. Arturo, what were the key findings, and what do those who have joined us today need to know about this, and what do you recommend for all organizations to implement to protect themselves from ransomware?
Yeah, and it's a very interesting thing because not surprisingly, ransomware is one of the most concerning and lead stories to come out of the FortiGuard Threat Landscape report. We've discussed this problem quite a bit, but it's always important to look at the bigger picture of what's going on with ransomware. So if we observing the entire year of ransomware data, it increased by 10 times over the last year. So this is a lot of activity, right? This has resulted in more families, more ransomware service models, ransomware as a service, and a lot of high-profiling attacks. This, if we want to talk about recommendations, these are simple but effective ways to protect yourself and your organization from ransomware impacts. So I think the first thing that we need to understand is that we need to develop a recovery plan, right? If we back up our systems regularly and store all that information, all that backups offline on a separate device, it's a good way to keep your information safe, right? Of course, use professional email and web security tools that can help you to inspect all the email attachments, all the websites, and all the files looking for malware or malicious behaviors. Of course, keep your operating systems, devices, and all your software patched and updated. It's a good way to maintain secure all your devices, right? Also, segment your network is a good way to stop or help you to do not infect any devices if you have any infection in your network in one area. So that means that segmentation helps you to cannot easily spread to another network or infect other devices, right? Of course, establish and enforce a permission and least privilege strategy is a good way to maintain all the data safe. And this is a good way to understand, and maybe we're going to talk about later about this, but the zero trust strategy is a good way to keep the information and keep tracking what data is accessed by the user, and of course, in a safe way, right?
That's excellent. Thank you, Arturo. Santiago, I would welcome your remarks here as well, and particularly on the notion of establishing an international coalition to combat ransomware. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, if I may, because it was a great answer from Arturo. I think that maybe the user awareness is key in ransomware or any other kind of malware attacks. Arturo mentioned a very important thing that is better prevent and be ready, because you can put a lot of cybersecurity measures in place, but things can happen, and when it happens, you need to be ready to recover fast and continue your business. So business continuity plan, prevention, and training is very important, but also user awareness. The user is now a key part of the network, because 2 years ago is crazy, but it's just 2 years ago in 2019, when you've been in your business, you reconnected your enterprise network with a lot of security, a lot of physical controls, but now people is and will continue working from their homes, where the cybersecurity measures are not the same as in the enterprise. So the user has a key role now, and the user awareness is really, really important to prevent this kind of attack, because many times the user is the door through which the attack enter to the company.
Thank you, Santiago. This leads me into another question in terms of the current state in Latin America, in terms of efforts made by governments in Latin America to combat cybersecurity. Santiago, in 2020, IDB and OAS collaborated on a report entitled Efforts to Improve Cybersecurity in the Americas Increase, but Work is Needed. The report highlighted efforts made by governments in Latin America and the Caribbean to manage cyber risk to their critical infrastructure, but it also exposed the various challenges that remained, such as the fact that more than 3/4 of the countries observed in the report lacked the critical infrastructure protection plans necessary for responding to cyber attacks. I think this is particularly worrying, and you think about it within the COVID-19 context. Santiago, can you highlight efforts made by governments in Latin America and the Caribbean to manage cyber risk, and what is the current state?
Sure, and thank you. Yes, this is the second edition of the cybersecurity maturity model of the region. That reports are done, we do it together with OEA, and we use the cybersecurity maturity model for nation from Oxford University. That model has 5 dimensions because cybersecurity is multidimensional topic. One of the dimensions is policy and strategy. The other one is culture and society. That means the end user is really important. The culture is very important. Knowledge and capabilities, legal and regulatory framework, and standard and technologies. The good news is that almost every country increased their cybersecurity capabilities from the 2016 edition to the 2020 edition. But the bad news is that that increment is not enough. And why it's not enough is because cyber attackers also increase their capabilities. So now we're in a region that has a accelerated digital transformation because of the pandemic. And we have a region where only 9 countries in the region has signed the Budapest Convention Agreement for cybercrime collaboration. That means that almost 22 countries doesn't have a mechanism for cybercrime collaboration worldwide or in the region. Another data, only 22 countries has a cybersecurity authority in place. And institutions are really important for cybersecurity because the first step is create that organizations or that institution that has the responsibility for cybersecurity. Because once you create that institution, then you're gonna be able to develop cybersecurity capability. But only 22 countries has that situation. And last but not least, another point is about critical infrastructure protection. Only 9 countries in the region has a critical infrastructure protection plan. And critical infrastructure protection is really important because it's directly attached to the quality of life of citizens. Electricity, water, health, we need that. That is part of our quality of life, and we need to protect, the government need to take action to protect that critical infrastructure. In the IDB, after that report, we take it very seriously, and we are working very hard to make cybersecurity protection for critical infrastructure. For example, we are working very hard in sectors, critical sectors, like, for example, health. Health is a really critical sector, and health sector need to be protected. What we did in the IDB, we built a lot of learning material, training, guides, studies, a lot of knowledge material to support the region to understand the problem and to guide the region. Okay, this is a way where you can fill the gap about cybersecurity for critical protection, for critical information protection. But we also developed some tools for self-assessment to make it easier for the region to know, okay, this is in this sector, for example, health, okay, this is my situation right now, I need to fill that gap. As reference, as a model of reference, we use the NIST cybersecurity framework. We found it very useful because it's very, very flexible and it's possible to flavor it for health. We also did it for smart cities. We also did it for electrical and for government. All that tools are not online yet. We're gonna launch it very soon. But that is the critical sector need to be protected. It's not just protect e-commerce and financial. There are many critical sectors that need to be protected, and the sectorial approach is one of the best way to approach it.
Thank you, Santiago. And you mentioned mechanisms to combat cybersecurity. And this next question is for Arturo. Recently, the USG released draft guidance to implement zero trust cybersecurity policy government-wide. Fortinet has a variety of expertise related to network security, cloud security, security operations, as well as security trust access. Could you elaborate a little bit on zero trust network access or architecture? And can you further elaborate on the role of zero trust network access in a digitized hemisphere?
Yeah, of course. I totally agree with Santiago. So if we're going to talk about zero trust, we need to understand that it's a network security philosophy that states that no one inside or outside the network should be trusted unless their identification has been truly checked. So zero trust also assumes that every attempt to access to the network or an application or every piece of information could be a threat. So these assumptions inform the thinking of network administrators and compelling them to design strengthened trustless and security measures. So the zero trust model is super important here because we already know that it's too easy to fall prey for any kind of cyber attacks, right? For email phishing, websites, and all that stuff. So if we deploy a zero trust model, it could be significantly scale down the room for cyber criminals to enter your organization. And of course, steal our data or information. So this solution was paramount around the shift of telework and should be carried through the shift of hybrid work or work from anywhere. So this is very important, and this is a good strategy to deploy for all the organizations.
I think whether an organization is a supplier, or a purchaser, ensuring that the development life cycle, you think about the supply chains and the management of ICT products and services are trustworthy and has never been more important. And with that, though, you need quite a bit of personnel to manage that. I think this is a good transition point to talk about qualified cybersecurity professionals. Santiago, the Chamber is a strong supporter for the promotion of cyber education and training initiatives. In addition to focusing on technical skills and soft skills, we've encouraged governments to develop a systematic program of capacity building that promotes the values of a free, open, and secure internet. So any training should also include a component of international norms on how international laws applies to cyberspace. Santiago, from your perspective, what is the current state of qualified cybersecurity professionals and high-quality cybersecurity services in Latin America?
Thank you, Abel, for the question. It's a great question because, from my point of view, the lack of cybersecurity professional is the biggest challenge for the region. And the lack of cybersecurity professionals is a worldwide problem. We also have it in the region in Latin America and the Caribbean. And the lack of cybersecurity professional makes that this high quality cybersecurity services provided for companies in the region is also very few because they don't have professionals to hire. And at the same time, the lack of cybersecurity professional in the region produce a lack of cybersecurity professors in the education system. So, as we don't have cybersecurity professionals, we are not able to have professors, and we are not able to build new professionals, and the companies are not able to hire cybersecurity professional. And we're in a kind of lockdown there. It's like we are blocked. We are having a big problem there. In the region, that problem is bigger. As I mentioned before, cybersecurity, the lack of cybersecurity professionals is a worldwide problem. For example, here in US, if you take as a reference CyberSec, US needs almost 500,000 of cybersecurity professionals. And it's very similar in Europe. So when in the region Latin America and Caribbean, you make the effort to build a new cybersecurity professional, after that, you need to make a bigger effort to retain it in the region. Because if not, the most economically evolved market like US or Europe, they're gonna take it, that professional. So we need to build professional and we need to retain the professional in the region because the demand of other region is huge. It's a big challenge. What we are doing in the IDB to fight to that problem, we're working very close with universities, together with University Carlos III of Madrid. We made a study in the region trying to understand what the universities needs for develop cybersecurity master degrees. With that information, that document is online. With that information, we built a cybersecurity master degree program guide where you can find the syllabus, all the courses, the content of the courses, the way of evaluate the students. That is a guide for universities. It's very useful because if you're a university, you can use that guide to create your cybersecurity master degree. Together with that initiative, we create a network of universities that has initiative in cybersecurity. That network name is CyberLAC and gonna become public next week, 29 October. That network was created making that study that I mentioned before. While we've been developing that study and that guide, we found a lot of need from university. For example, university needs professor. So a network approach make very good synergy to share professors from country to country. Cybersecurity education needs laboratories, and laboratories are expensive and are hard to maintain. So what if universities can share laboratories in the region to develop professionals? So we are working very hard on that, and we know that is a problem, the lack of professionals, but it also can be an opportunity. Why an opportunity is because the lack of professionals is a worldwide problem.
Absolutely.
So why, if you try to export cybersecurity service overseas? As I mentioned, US need almost 500,000 cybersecurity professionals. Could the region use that as an opportunity for employment, for export? Was mentioned in the session before that Uruguay, for example, export a lot of software from Uruguay, a small country, to US and to other countries around the world. So maybe could be a good strategy for countries to invest in cybersecurity professional developing and then try to export services not only in the region, but also to Europe and the US.
Thank you, Santiago. Appreciate those remarks. And I'm going to transition over to the next question in terms of promoting a system of norms. The Chamber is a strong supporter of establishing and promoting a system of norms built through international engagement and cooperation that promotes responsible behavior in cyberspace and over time reduces cyber risk to critical infrastructure. In response to the promotion of system norms, can you talk a little bit, Arturo, about the importance of building and partnering with allies to hold nation states' actions accountable for cyber activities that really deviate from what we perceive as norms of responsible behavior? And what are the roles of the private sector stakeholders in this context?
Yeah, of course. As we know, the cybercrime landscape is quite diverse and dynamic, right? So threat actors range from individuals to loosely connected cross-national collectives to large organizations that in many cases enjoy a degree of support, tolerance, or even direction from nation states. So there's some examples how these kind of partnerships, intelligent partnerships or cybersecurity partnerships are working, like the recent takedown of the Emotet and TrickBot campaigns. So those takedowns are a good reference for sure. It shows that all these efforts really works, right? However, the more we coordinate, the better. The takedown and disruption can be better, right? So the three key points area that we detected is we need to build a cyber resilience strategy. So you can change cyber resilience by developing and, of course, scaling forward-looking of solutions and promoting effective practices across digital system will be better for organizations and public and private sectors, right? We need to start strengthening global cooperation. This is very important because if we enhance that between public and private stakeholders by fostering collective response to cybercrime, will be better equally for us. And of course, we need to understand the future networks and technology. This is a key piece because if we identify all these future cybersecurity challenges and opportunities, we can create a strategy. Maybe as Santiago talked before, we can create education and of course, try to help to build new cybersecurity professionals to use this technology and of course, help us to develop new strategies to defend from cybercrime.
That's excellent. Thank you, Arturo. We are coming close to our time here, and I would like to just allow you both to provide some closing remarks, specifically 30 seconds, specifically on speaking about the importance of the multi-stakeholder process and partnerships. This was an element that was brought up in previous discussions prior to this panel. Of course, it was also a theme of this discussion, and touching on issues such as intelligence sharing and strategic communications and access. Santiago, 30 seconds, please.
Yeah. Collaboration and partnership are key in this. It's not possible to manage cybersecurity only from one point of view. The government by itself cannot do it. As I mentioned before, the government needs education, education needs government and education need private sector, and collaboration is key. But collaboration you can have many layers of collaboration. There is one layer of collaboration, one dimension that is about strategies, about policies, about institution, organization, that all the countries in the region need to understand who is who and what is what for each country. So if country A think that this is a cybercrime in my country, and this is the institution responsible for that, and you need to share information with this, and in this way, country B need to have an equivalent model to fit and to be able to collaborate in that. The other layer or the other dimension of collaboration is a technical and operative. And in that layer, technology, infrastructure, and private sector is key because you need to be able to share information. I wish faster than the attackers, but at least at the same speed of the attacker to share information, share technology, be able to work together. Not, for example, I mentioned about services, the high quality cybersecurity services. It's very important to be coordinated which service is going to be needed and which services going to be provided. If you're not attached in this way, and I need this, but the market give me this, we are in a problem.
Very good point.
And the third option is about capacity building. I think that all together need to develop capabilities in the region. It's like, it's really important to understand that all the layers need to be coordinated. Sorry for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Santiago. We have come to the end of our time. I want to thank both of our panelists for this great discussion. It's been a pleasure moderating this, and we look forward to future engagements on these very important issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Santiago, Arturo, and Abel, for a fantastic conversation. We are delighted to have with us today Jose Fernandez, Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment at the U.S. Department of State. The Undersecretary is no stranger to the ACLA family. In his former roles, he's participated in our ACLA meetings and has engaged with our AmCham network across the region. As he takes on this new role, we look forward to partnering with him in driving the administration's priorities in the region. I am pleased to turn now to Neil Harrington, Senior Vice President for the Americas, for a conversation with Undersecretary Fernandez.
Thanks very much for that introduction, Isabel. It is indeed my distinct pleasure to welcome Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment, Jose Fernandez. Undersecretary Fernandez has pursued an illustrious career in both public service and the private sector, and he's well known to us both in Washington and to our ACLA stakeholders around the hemisphere. Reason being that prior to his current role, he served with distinction in the Obama administration as Assistant Secretary of State for Economic, Energy, and Business Affairs from 2009 to 2013. The Undersecretary is also widely recognized for his accomplishments in the illegal arena, where before moving back to Washington to serve in the Biden administration, he was a partner at the prestigious New York firm Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. Undersecretary Fernandez is also very active in the community service, having served in roles such as Director of the Partnership for Inner City Education in New York, Commissioner of the New York City Latin Media Entertainment Commission, and co-founder and former chairman of the Latino International Theater Festival in New York, among many other civic activities. The Undersecretary runs a very broad global portfolio in the Economic Bureau, so we're especially appreciative to him for taking time to speak about our region today. In addition to having a very strong interest in Latin American and Caribbean affairs, the Undersecretary also speaks the 4 principal languages of the region in English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. Undersecretary, it's an honor to welcome you, and if you're amenable, we'll jump right into some questions. Let's start with the subject of, thank you so much, Mr. Undersecretary, for being with us. We'll start with the subject of digital transformation, which is something I know you're keenly focused on globally. The long-term challenge of inequality in Latin America and the Caribbean has really been exacerbated by the pandemic, as you know, and we've seen this play out in the so-called digital divide. What do you think can be done to address the digital divide across the region and to unlock the potential of digitalization to help drive inclusive economic recovery? And what are your priorities and what do you see as the role of 5G?
Thank you, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to the Chamber for all the good work that they do in the Hemisphere. As you well know, we share in the United States many of the same goals as our partners in Latin America and the Caribbean. And at the end of the day, we want to expand internet access, reduce the cost of connectivity for consumers and for businesses, and drive secure and reliable network investments. To this end, we've been focused on 5G deployment in the Hemisphere as a policy imperative. That's because 5G will form and transform the very foundation of a vibrant and secure global digital economy that closes the digital divide and allows all people and businesses to benefit as we build back better from the economic toll of the pandemic. 5G will be the foundation on which so many social, economic, and environmental advances, including those that we can't yet imagine, will be built. Things like self-driving vehicles, telemedicine, smart manufacturing, and so many more will be further enabled through 5G communications networks. We know that for many businesses and people, the arrival of 5G technology and all its disruptive impacts will raise important questions. Governments, businesses, and others are considering ways to safely realize the potential of 5G and ensure that the technologies, jobs, and opportunities that it creates lead to a brighter future for all. We in the U.S. And are one of the many countries that are asking ourselves how 5G can help connect those who still lack access to the internet and the basic public service that it can help deliver. We're asking how we can ensure that the next generation network is secure and are operated by trustworthy vendors. We're asking how we can develop the workforces to support thriving 5G enabled commercial ecosystems. We're excited by 5G, but we also realize that we've got to be prepared for it.
I really appreciate the way you lay that out, because I think the way that you're thinking about it is all about trying to predict a future we don't know, but being prepared for a future that we don't know, and doing the best we can to prepare the road ahead. Sticking kind of with that theme, we hear a lot about the importance of completing 4G and 5G deployment, and the choice countries and businesses need to make between what's seen as a limited set of geographical or company-specific options. So you have the Chinese or European competitors, Huawei, or versus the Nokias or Ericssons. How, from your perspective, how do you see this competition?
Well, look, let's start from the beginning. The U.S. supports free market competition in all sectors, and we support increasing vendor diversity in the 5G space, specifically because it will increase the competition and innovation that benefits all countries. In 5G, we're no longer talking about solely a choice between the existing full stack providers that you mentioned. There are also exciting developments creating new opportunities by breaking apart what's called a full stack of currently closed proprietary hardware and software that the largest vendors offer. And this includes open interoperable approaches, like something you may have heard about, the open radio access network technology that's people call Open RAN. This promises to increase vendor diversity and market competition, and has the potential, and this is important in the developing world, has the potential to lower costs and to improve security. Open RAN, which I know that many of your members support, offers telecommunications providers the opportunity to go in a different direction. One that is interoperable, secure, and more affordable, because Open RAN is open to competition. And this is no longer theory. Many in the region are already seeing the benefits of Open RAN 5G deployments. It's not just a U.S. or Latin American phenomenon. It's a global industry movement. We're seeing and watching the deployment of 4G and 5G networks based on Open RAN principles in Japan, in Colombia, Argentina, in India. Additional deployments have been announced in Germany and the UK. And in the United States, Dish Networks is building an Open RAN 5G network from the ground up. Companies on every continent are coming together to develop standardized open interfaces that allow mobile network operators to mix and match hardware and software to meet their needs. No government mandated it. This is just happening organically. By disaggregating the vertically integrated model that dominates the market now, operators around the world can escape being locked into one single vendor and can withstand any market or geopolitical forces that could come between them. This creates not only opportunities for lower costs and increased competition, but also offers new innovative companies a chance to develop the equipment and software that they need to enter the market and to generate high quality jobs for our citizens and for our communities. So in short, this is a paradigm in telecommunications infrastructure, one that would have been hard to imagine even 2 or 3 years ago. And I think you'll see that competition and innovation will thrive in the 5G space in years to come.
I think you absolutely hit on a nexus which is so critical to us at the Chamber. open and free competition begets innovation, begets lower cost, right? And that you're absolutely right that fewer things than importance of cost and accessibility are important are as important in our region. Let's pivot, if you would, to something else. You mentioned Build Back Better. It's on a lot of our minds, and so to the topic of infrastructure. As you well know, it's been a key impediment to growth across our region, including here in the U.S. We could argue, in terms of the insufficient infrastructure we're seeing, certainly in the Americas. It's something the Biden administration is very focused on here at home in advancing the bipartisan infrastructure framework. Talk, if you would, about how the Build Back Better World initiative will help support the region's infrastructure development.
Thanks, Neil. The U.S. recognizes the tremendous infrastructure needs across low and middle income countries, which some people put at over 40 trillion with a T, $40 trillion by 2035. And we've realized that U.S. companies have a business opportunity in the infrastructure space around the world, but it's also a strategic imperative for the United States government to have our companies become involved in the infrastructure boom around the world. The pandemic has stretched resources even further, with governments around the world struggling to meet domestic infrastructure needs. The impact, as we know, the impact of the pandemic have disproportionately affected low and middle income countries. But infrastructure that is low quality, infrastructure that feeds corruption or exacerbates environmental degradation may only end up contributing to even greater challenges for countries over time. On the other hand, done the right way with transparent, sustainable investment in projects that respond to the country's needs and engage their local workers to maintain high labor and environmental standards, infrastructure can in fact be a strong foundation that allows societies in low and middle income countries to grow and to prosper. I remember when I was doing infrastructure work, telecoms work in Latin America, the studies would show that improving the telecommunications infrastructure would bring a fivefold benefit to the economies in the region. President Biden realizes this. He's committed to putting forth an affirmative and comprehensive initiative that addresses all of these challenges. He's recognized that the timing, in fact, is ripe for major democracies to show leadership and to take action on this issue. He's worked with G7 leaders to reach agreement on something that we've called the Build Back Better World Partnership in Washington speak. That's B3W. Build Back Better is a values-driven, high-standard, and transparent infrastructure partnership that can offer recipient communities the long-run benefits, protections, and transparency that they deserve. And the President's vision for B3W is to work with partners that share our democratic values to finance and develop infrastructure in a manner that is transparent, sustainable, and adheres to high standards. And that's important. We're not going to engage in a race to the bottom. So through Build Back Better World, the U.S. and its G7 partners will offer local communities in low and middle income countries help in building infrastructure, including sustainable and resilient projects that focus on climate, on health security, on technology, and on gender equity and equality. What we aim to do, together with the private sector, the private sector will be critical here, and our G7 partners, we will aim to mobilize hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure investment across the globe. We've seen a recent trip to the region by Deputy National Security Advisor Singh and the Chief Operating Officer of the Development Finance Corporation. They took a trip to the region in September to show our commitment to strengthening our ties with Latin America and the value that we place in working with countries in the region in narrowing the massive global gaps in physical, digital, and human infrastructure that have been widened by the COVID-19 pandemic. So B3W is a vehicle. It's a vehicle through which the U.S. will continue to engage with government and with other key stakeholders to support local communities in a way that responds to the needs of those communities and also advances the highest standards for transparency, for anti-corruption, for financial sustainability, for labor protection, and for environmental protection. It'll be a race to the top. And if we succeed, I think all of us in the region will be better off for it.
I think that's so well said, Mr. Undersecretary, because indeed, as you know well, our competitors aren't necessarily in the region, aren't necessarily interested in the race to the top. Sometimes they do race to the bottom when it comes to the principles and standards that they apply in infrastructure. So count on us. I feel confident in saying count on us as the chamber and being in your partner in this effort.
Neil, you will be critical on this, and we will. If we can level the playing field, and if we can raise the standards, we will compete. And if we compete, U.S. businesses, U.S. companies will do well. I have confidence in that.
I totally agree with you, and we hear all the time, as I'm sure you do. Our trade partners, our partners in the region prefer U.S. technology. They prefer U.S. partnership because it's long term. It's not short term, as some of our adversaries, let's put it that way, think in terms of their engagement in the region.
So that, one, you're bringing up a good point, and something that Build Back Better will talk about is something called long-term costs. I can build your road really cheaply, but if you've got to maintain it constantly, it will be more expensive in the long run. We know it in our personal lives. If we buy a cheap car, what happens? And it's the same thing in infrastructure. So I look forward to working with the chamber on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me pivot to something else that I know is near the top of your agenda, if not at the very top of your agenda, and that is small business. It's clear, certainly it's a keen area of interest to us, clearly at the chamber, since SMEs are the true engines of growth and job creation in this country and across our hemisphere. How can we ensure that economic growth is more inclusive and that women and other traditionally marginalized groups have opportunities to lead in business?
Look, if the pandemic has taught us one thing, is that our small businesses have to be part of the solution, and we can't leave them behind. If the region is going to recover fully, then we have to give everybody with an idea or with a dream, the tools and support that they need to access the capital, markets, and networks that they need to start and to grow. Economic opportunity has to be inclusive. It has to enhance opportunities for all people. It has to recognize the what we call the intersectionality of race, ethnicity, gender, disability, gender identity, you name it. Advancing the economic empowerment of women in all their diversity intersects with each of these priority areas, and it's critical to addressing the challenges of our time, including COVID-19, the climate crisis, gender-based violence, racial and ethnic inequities, and economic inequality. Gender inequality is a driver rather than a symptom of poverty, and women's full participation in the economy benefits the economy as a whole. There are plenty of studies that you will find out there that show, without a doubt, that investing in women entrepreneurs powers local prosperity. That's something that I am personally invested in. I will, in every interaction that I have, when I go abroad, I will talk about the need to make sure that we recognize that women face unique challenges in accessing markets and accessing employment. And that's why I think that it's important that over half of the clients of the small business development centers in our hemisphere are women business owners. So watch this space. And our actions will don't take my word for it. Our actions will be the proof in the pudding, right? We're going to focus on gender inequality and making sure that we address those challenges that are unique to women.
I really appreciate you touching on this, Undersecretary, because I mean, at the end of the day, these are marginalized communities, starting with women, starting with minority communities in the U.S. and around the region, have had long-standing challenges to beginning to begin with, that have only been exacerbated by the pandemic. So there can be no greater priority, which than to face up to these questions as public and private sector immediately. So that, I guess, allows me to pivot to my last question, since we've talked a little bit, and you've talked very eloquently about it. But turning to the topic of health, since there's no more important subject for a Latin American region that has been arguably hit harder by the pandemic than any other part of the world, talk, if you would, about how the United States is supporting the global COVID-19 response, including by supporting equitable access to life-saving COVID-19 vaccines.
Well, I mean, I think we all know that COVID-19 has shown that none of us are safe until we're all safe, right? And that we have to expand production, and we've got to promote equitable global distribution of safe, effective, and high-quality vaccines in order to bring an end to this pandemic. President Biden, promised that the U.S. would be an arsenal of vaccines for the world, an arsenal of vaccines for the world. And we've delivered. We are the largest single donor to Gavi in support of COVAX. We've provided over $4 billion to date. We've committed to providing more than 1.1 billion doses of safe and effective vaccines to our international partners. And we've done this transparently. We've done it with no strings attached to our donations, and we've done it in a way, in the form of donations. And that's important. That separates the United States response to a lot of other countries in the world. To date, we've donated about 47 million doses of vaccines to 30 countries in the Western Hemisphere. And we will continue. We're not done yet. We are going to continue this effort because, again, we've got to make sure that we are all safe, because this is a pandemic that will not stop at borders. We're also partnering with the private sector to expand capacity to produce safe and effective vaccines at home and abroad, together with international partners. We're looking at opportunities to support local and regional manufacturing capacity and to further support medical supply chains in the Americas. Just last month, the president convened a virtual COVID-19 summit on the margins of the high-level week at the UN General Assembly. It was a summit that was attended by more than 100 foreign chiefs of state, heads of government, ministers, and many other high-level delegation members, and also over 100 leaders from international organizations, from the private sector, from philanthropies, NGOs, and many other partners. And we were all there together to tackle the pandemic with new and with focused urgency, and to see if we could cooperate on our collective response to this crisis to secure the future, to end what's been a scourge for the last couple of years in our lives, to end the COVID-19 pandemic in 2022, and to build back better global health security to prevent and to prepare for future pandemics. Governments can do a lot. We know that. But we also know that we can't do everything on our own. And so you'll see that we are calling, and will continue to call on our non-government partners, including the private sector, to take up the call for new actions that will solve the core challenges of making vaccines available to everyone, and not just to everyone, but everywhere, and also to help us solve the oxygen availability crisis, to help us with financing health security, and to building back better public health security systems in order to prevent the next pandemic. This is what we will need to work with the private sector, and we hope that, and we know, actually more than we hope, we know that we will be able to count on the support of our companies.
That's so well said. I think you said it perfectly. None of us is safe until all of us are safe. And I think I think I speak for all of our member companies that have been closely working with the administration on PPE delivery, vaccine delivery, logistics, and the manufacturing, certainly initiatives that you talk about in terms of ensuring that supply chain reaches Latin America in medical supply chain as well as across all other sectors. So you've been more than generous with your time, Undersecretary. We're really grateful for you sharing your perspectives and thoughts. We had a tremendous partnership with you during your time in the Obama administration. We absolutely are looking forward to that. I appreciate you spending time in our silo of the world here. We know you've got a giant global portfolio, and I know I speak for Myron. He's counting on you and working closely with you around the world. But for now, on behalf of ACLA and our work in Latin America, we really appreciate your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a great day, Undersecretary.
During our Full-Light Conference, we've incorporated a series of spotlights highlighting relevant topics that provide insight on relevant issues in the region. Yesterday, we heard from BNA Americas on their political analysis on recent and upcoming elections in the region. Today, we kick off with a voice from the border region featuring Gerald Schwebel, Executive Vice President of IBC Bank, who will discuss U.S.-Mexico cross-border trade and customs issues and other strategic priorities. Gerald, please welcome.
Part of the world you're from, and my pleasure to be with you all today, and thank the Chamber and ACLA for inviting us to share with you our perspective of those of us that live and work every day of our lives along the U.S.-Mexico border, but also perhaps even a perspective of similarities between the northern border as well. From our standpoint, my life every day starts in the port city of Laredo, Texas. In my office as a banker, I oversee Interstate Highway 35, which begins in Laredo, Texas, and ends in Laredo, Texas. But in Mexico, Highway 85 that also cuts through the heart of Mexico into Central America and eventually into South America. So our perspective that we want to share with you today is one of what we are living as a result of cross-border trade, as a result of the expanded growth since the North American Free Trade Agreement and now the USMCA agreement that we live every day. Trade is part of our lives. I thank God that I live in Texas. I thank God that I live and work in Laredo, Texas every day, because this is where we really breathe the life of cross-border trade and cross-border activity that creates jobs and creates, substantial economic benefit, not only to the North American region, but allows us to compete on a global basis. So today, I'm sharing with you a perspective of what a southern port life means, and the importance of ports such as ours to the North American regional activity, to the Western Hemispheric activity, as a result of expanded competitiveness models that are out there. So I'll talk a little bit about what we see every day, what the impact of the supply chain that we are hearing so much in the news in today's environment. Just today, hearing the challenges of ports like Long Beach and LA, but no one's immune to those challenges. And a land port like Laredo, Texas, which also is a significant port for trade, is one that I think we all need to be sensitive and cognizant that we pay attention to any disruptors to that supply chain network, and whether they be as a result of economic disruptors, or for that matter, any other outliers that may be there. And perhaps more relevant recently, you've seen the challenges of the migration challenges that we're facing through our ports as well. So first of all, let me start off by saying that a picture of who we are. I'm in Texas. I'm in Laredo, Texas, as I said, where Interstate Highway 35 begins, known as the North American Corridor. But Texas alone has 28 ports along its Texas-Mexico border. I happen to have worked directly with 20 of those ports and up and down the corridor through San Antonio, Dallas, east to Houston, and all the way through Oklahoma and up to the Canadian border. But for us, trade is a way of life. trucks. We love trucks. We love railroads. We love planes, because that is the flow of commerce. That is the vitality. It's been described that being in Texas, if you look at the United States being a body, Texas is the heart. But when you look at Interstate Highway 35, it's the aorta. So when you talk about problems of on the aorta, whether it's a blockade or slowdown or any significant illness regards to that, it has an impact on the whole North American economy. So consider that being the case. The bulk of our activity is related not just to automotive, which Mexico has become a significant automotive platform for the world, but also electronics, but even more importantly, the breadbasket, the food industry, the agriculture sectors, all key sectors to the U.S. economy. Much of what we consume and we eat in North America comes out of Mexico, quite frankly. So that creates jobs and has economic impact. Let me share with you just a little bit of a perspective of what the movement of people and goods through ports like Laredo mean. In 2019, the movement of people and goods through the Texas-Mexico border generated over 7 million jobs and more than $350 billion of GDP in both the countries of the United States and Mexico. But by 2050, the economic impact of cross-border trade will increase to over 20 million jobs and nearly $1.2 trillion in GDP. I share that with you because sometimes many do not understand the significance of ports, whether they be seaports or land ports or even airports, to the entire way of life and to our economy and the creation of jobs. So, having said that, it's important that we continue to plan adequately for the infrastructure debate that's going on right now, that we have the adequate infrastructure to facilitate the flow of people and the flow of goods, that they flow securely and efficiently and as fast as possible. Everyone has been following the challenges that ports like LA Long Beach are having. We could pretend we have those same challenges here. We've had them in ports like Del Rio with the migration challenges. We have them right now. We've been living in ports, land ports, with restrictions of what is considered non-essential travelers. In ports like Laredo and the city of Nuevo Laredo, our sister city, we say that we are one city in two countries because we're so integrated as communities and we're so interdependent. But that translates to the resiliency not only of the people of the business community of the border, but also how it translates into the economic impact of the interiors of Mexico, the United States, and Canada. But it even transcends beyond the North American region into Central America and into South America, because many of those goods also emanate from different parts of the Western Hemisphere. So for us, the experience of the border presents challenges of the movement of goods not being disrupted or interrupted so that we can continue to let the supply chain flow. And at the same time that we have the adequate immigration policies that are adequately to supply the workforce that we need in our countries. And so what we put together very clearly, that the private sector engagement, and I was glad to see Secretary Fernandez refer to this in his presentation, the importance of how the private sector needs to work hand in hand with the public sector, with the governments at all levels, federal, state, and local governments, so that we adequately plan for that infrastructure to support that flow of that supply chain. So we put together in our part of the world, through that private sector engagement, a series of recommendations to a document that we talk about border management solutions. These are common sense recommendations that the private sector has been working with organizations such as the U.S. Chamber or even state chambers or local chambers to recommend to the powers that be at the federal level that we also have a major stake in sharing with you what we would consider to be important recommendations, whether they be on the trade side or they be on the immigration side. And that's why we look forward to continuing to work with all parties to ensure that we have the adequate solutions, common sense solutions to the challenges that we face, whether they be COVID related or they just be just technology related, because the innovative technologies that we have to facilitate that process of cross-border trade is something that we also need to stay on top of and stay ahead of it, instead ahead of it and try to play catch up. So as we move forward into this new dimension of expanded more trade post COVID, we've been fortunate that the trade sector has been considered an essential part of the COVID protocols, and that those trade numbers for ports like Laredo came back very quickly from March of the implementation back in 2020 to what we are today, 20 months later. But the trade numbers really were back on track to pre-COVID numbers by September of last year, and they will continue to grow. And the projections for expanded trade are being exceeded even as we speak. But remember, it's important that we have not just the goods flowing securely and fast and efficiently, but the people also need to flow efficiently. That truck driver, those families that come and contribute to the economy, and those consumers that are very important to us. So I hope that by today, my message from the border is one that we meet our challenges that we continue to have on a day-to-day basis. And we are a significant part of the North American economy, the Western Hemisphere economy, the global economy. And that's what we hope to contribute through the expanded infrastructure and processes of our ports of entry that facilitate those goods and services and the people. So I thank for the opportunity to speak with you today. And I hope that my message is clear to you all, that the significance is very relevant to each and every one that is listening and watching us today, and that you play a part. And as we contribute, we share that knowledge and information with each and every one of you all. So thank you for allowing me to share my message to you all today.
On our next spotlight, we'll focus on the digital transformation in Latin America and the Caribbean. The spotlight will be led by Mauricio Ramos, CEO, Millicom, where he will discuss the opportunities, challenges, and the broader future of connectivity in the region. Mauricio, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me join you here. I'm delighted to be participating here today. As many of you know, Millicom, with our brand name Tigo, we have been invested in the Central American and Caribbean region now for 30 years. And today, we're one of the largest investors in that region, certainly the largest telecom investor in the region. And we see a region, as we always have, full of challenges, but we see it with tremendous amount of optimism. And that's the first point I want to bring to this forum today. We are putting a ton of our capital, billions of dollars of our capital, into this beautiful region. And we do it because we have had a history of success, but we look into the future with tremendous amounts of optimism. This is a region with a young population, with a growing middle class, and that combination leads to young entrepreneurs who are proficient in English that want to do better in life. They want to get ahead in life. They want a better future for them and for the young families. And they're increasingly growing digital because they're young, because they're looking to the future, because they want to be connected with their labor, with their intellect, with their intelligence to the rest of the world. And that leads me to my second point today. In order to allow all the possibilities that this growing young population and all they have to offer to the region and to the world is indeed capitalized, we need to be able to connect them to the world. And that's my second point. The future of development for this region relies heavily on closing the digital divide that the region currently has. Speaking generally, throughout Latin America, the penetration of broadband is still fairly limited. When you looked at the residential penetration of fixed broadband, it's somewhere around 40 to 50%, which means that only 1 out of 2 households actually has a high-speed fixed broadband connection. When you look at mobile, only about 50 to 60% have mobile broadband connectivity, which means just about 1 out of 2, give or take, individuals still lacking a mobile broadband connection to the world. The Inter-American Development Bank has estimated that closing this divide will cost somewhere around $50 billion on the fixed networks needed, and somewhere around $18 billion on the mobile networks needed. So it's a big divide, is my second point, and it requires a ton of money to be closed. And we need to therefore start looking at this as infrastructure for development. I no longer use the words telecom or networks. I simply speak of digital infrastructure. And when you look at the purpose that Millicom has today about what we do in the region, we talk about our purpose being building those digital highways that will connect individuals and develop our communities. Because indeed it is infrastructure. It's digital, but it's infrastructure for development. So we think of this as the equivalent for the digital economy of the ports and the highways and the airports that are required for the physical economy to sell its goods and services to the international communities. So whereas potatoes and tomatoes and coffee and textiles and even industry require ports and airports, the digital economy requires digital highways. And when you think about it that way, you realize that all of this money indeed needs to flow to our countries for these digital highways to be built. Now, these digital highways, these pipes, these cables, these antennas, they may not be as sexy as perhaps the Googles or the Amazons or the Netflix surely are. But guess what? None of that tech can access, work in our economies without these telecom networks, without this digital infrastructure. Said bluntly, there's no Uber, there's no Google, there's no Amazon, there's no Netflix, there's no future digital development in our economies without these telecom networks, these digital highways that we believe it's our purpose to build for the regions we operate in. Which then leads me to the fourth point I want to make today, which is it is us, the telecom companies, it is us that are building the digital highways, putting up the capital, taking the risk, and making sure there's connectivity so that our economies can be connected to the fourth industrial revolution, to the world, to the big tech of the world. And when you think about that, and the kinds of money that I've been talking about, you'll quickly realize that I need to make a fifth point today, which is these monies, this financing, which is in the billions, is not readily available in our markets, in Honduras or Colombia or even the Caribbean. It needs to flow because it's in the billions and it needs to be put up front, and for the long term, it needs to flow from the capital markets, whether it's debt or equity, in London and New York and Europe. And as a result of that, we need to be cognizant that we, in our countries, and I'm a Latino, we need to create what I call a money cycle. We need to create an ecosystem in which we attract this money, we make sure they have a return so that we can go back and ask for more money, so that we create a virtuous money cycle in which there's a ton of investment, foreign direct investment, the type that Millicom has been making in the region, so that we have a healthy financing for the build out of these digital highways into the future. What does this mean? This means, in our opinion, that we really need to think through again at some of the paradigms that we've had historically. This is no longer a voice network where you build a network and you have a return on it for the next 10 to 20 years, like it used to be 10 or 20 years ago. Now we're building networks for data. Everything that goes is data. And by definition, the use of data is illimited because each one of us uses more data every day than we did before. More application, more devices, more definition, potentially holograms on the future. And more things are getting connected, whether it's things or wear tech is getting connected. It's not just us making calls, which means the capacity, it's no longer defined and steady for the next 10 years. It is doubling every year. And as a result of that, we need to retool a little bit our toolkit. The things we need to rethink are the use of spectrum. It used to be that charging the telecom players for spectrum was a good way to finance the fiscal deficits. In a cash-rich, returns are high environment, that probably made a lot of sense. But if what we are focused on going forward is closing that digital divide, making sure we have as much connectivity as we possibly can, making sure as much investment flows into these digital highways as it is possible, then we've got to rethink whether we want to extract a toll called spectrum and take it somewhere else, because that dollar that could have gone into networks would otherwise go into spectrum and used elsewhere. So let's rethink whether we put spectrum on the table for more digital connectivity. Let's also think and rethink the amounts of fees and licenses and taxes, sometimes even on the handset themselves, that we still putting on the digital economy. If we want a robust digital economy, why do we keep putting specific taxes on this sector? Gotta rethink that one through if we really want to close this digital divide and we want to connect our region into the world. And we also need to rethink a little bit the paradigm, which I don't think is valid anymore, of our industry structure. It used to be that 4 players was the best industry structure for consumers. But that was not in an investment-heavy scenario, where you could indeed have a return if you had 4 networks built out in a given country. But with such amount of capital needed to build these networks, with the need that everyone has for connectivity and the continuously increasing demands for data, do we really think maximizing the benefits for our society comes from having 3 and even 4 networks, each one of them reaching every individual and every household? And by definition, each one of them will get to be used a third or a fourth of its use capacity. Do we really, can we afford to have so much unused capacity? Are we not better off with a new model like many countries around the world are adopting, in which we have 2 strong players, maybe 3, that have the ability to invest because their use capacity is being used, as opposed to unused if you have too many networks, none of which is being fully used. We got to rethink industry structure. We got to rethink licenses and fees and taxes. We got to rethink spectrum if we really want to put more money to work towards creating a better, stronger digital economy. Which leads me to the last point I want to make today, which is we as a society in our region, Central America and the Caribbean, we really, really need to embrace digital. We need to make digital a fundamental pillar that makes every other sector of the economy enabled for a digital future. It is infrastructure, which by definition means it benefits everyone, which means we got to do 3 things. Think of it as digital infrastructure. 2, embrace the innovation it brings. Think of fintech now through mobile. Think of what Africa did, bringing fintech into mobile. We have mobile networks now that reach 80% of our population. Imagine using them to bring in financial inclusion through mobile fintech. Got to open up ourselves to that, because if we do, then we're going to bring a lot more of our population into fintech, into technology, and into a formal economy. And we also have the opportunity to bring into the region thinking about future networks. Perhaps there is an opportunity, like we're doing at Millicom, to start testing Open RAN initiatives and bringing more software-defined networks that over time will provide us with safer networks, more innovative networks, and networks that are prepared for the future. If you think of all the things we need to do to our digital infrastructure, the amounts of resources we need to bring, it is absolutely essential that we put digital first and foremost in our priorities for the region. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope I made a couple of points that will help us be better in the region. Gracias.
Wrapping up this segment is our Spotlight on Trade, Opportunities in Central America and the Caribbean, featuring Beth Hughes, Vice President for Trade and Customs Policy at the American Apparel and Footwear Association. She will discuss the potential of trade through the existing CAFTA-DR trade agreement. Beth, I invite you to provide your remarks.
Thanks, Isabel. My name is Beth Hughes, and I'm the Vice President for Trade and Customs Policy at the American Apparel and Footwear Association. AAFA represents over 1,000 world-famous name brands. Our members service many markets from a variety of different production locations around the world. U.S. apparel companies are rethinking their sourcing strategies away from China. Sustainability, speed to market, and geography all play a part. The Western Hemisphere has an opportunity to capture that production leaving China, specifically Central America. The U.S.-Central America economic relationship is far from reaching its potential to increase jobs, investment, economic growth, and shared regional prosperity. Trade in apparel has actually declined in the 15 years the Dominican Republic-Central America Free Trade Agreement has been in force. And that is why a group of U.S. companies, associations, and think tanks have come together to form the Coalition for Economic Partnerships in the Americas. Enormous promise lies in our trading relationship, especially in the textiles and apparel sector, where both Central America and the United States have complementary strengths that could ignite lasting mutual benefits. We know that jobs in apparel production provide higher wages, and the region has the social institutions and civil societies that create an environment more amenable with labor compliance compared to major apparel producing countries in other parts of the world. As the Biden-Harris administration works to address the root causes of migration, the Coalition for Economic Partnerships in the Americas strongly supports a whole-of-government approach to include CAFTA-DR, regional infrastructure, and customs operations in the policy toolbox. Some of the specific trade policy and investment changes that are needed to expand Central American apparel production include relaxing the apparel rules of origin, expanding the short supply list to fast-track access to yarns and fabrics in limited supply but in high demand, facilitating accumulation so companies can source from other FTA partners and trade preference agreement partners, including tariff preference levels and earned import allowance programs. We also encourage the administration to look at the recommendations proposed by the Commercial Customs Operation Advisory Committee. They include trade finance and economic growth, such as banking and foreign direct investment, trade facilitation to include harmonizing customs processing and port operations across the countries in the region, infrastructure to improve ports, roads, and energy, security and corruption to combat smuggling and counterfeit trade, and capacity building like employment education. With the right policy changes, we can increase investment to Central America and create hundreds of thousands of jobs. Further, these policy recommendations will also increase U.S. textile exports to Central America. We can create an integrated and vertical supply chain right here in our own backyard. So let's grow trade, investment, and employment in the region. In the coming weeks, please visit cepacoalition.com to learn more about the coalition and our efforts to increase the competitiveness of the region. We are happy to partner with the U.S. Chambers Association of American Chambers of Commerce in Latin America and the Caribbean on this important issue. Thanks.
Unable to join us today, was Congressman Mark Greene. Although he couldn't participate, he did want to send us a message that he requested that we share with the group. It is important for us to have a view from the Hill, and it was important for us to hear from the Congressman. With that, I invite our AV team to play his remarks.
Hi, everybody. Congressman Mark Greene, and I am so sorry that I can't be with you guys today. As the ranking Republican on Western Hemisphere, it's my responsibility to work diligently for great relationships with Latin America and our Caribbean partners. The work that you guys are doing to advance liberty, economic prosperity, and the rule of law is making a huge difference. I appreciate the efforts. Look forward to working with you in the future. And again, I'm sorry I couldn't be with you today.
As we come to our last segment of our program, I am honored to introduce His Excellency Jose Pedro Castillo, President of Peru. With that, Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Señor Vicepresidente Ejecutivo y Jefe de Asuntos Internacionales de la Cámara de Comercio de Estados Unidos, señor Vicepresidente Senior de las Américas de la Cámara de Comercio de los Estados Unidos, estimados miembros de las Cámaras de Comercio americanas en Latinoamérica y el Caribe, señoras y señores, agradezco la invitación para participar en este evento en un momento crucial para nuestra región. Aunque la población de América Latina y el Caribe solo representa el 8% de la población mundial, alrededor del 30% de las víctimas de la COVID-19 pertenecieron a nuestros países. Esta pandemia no solo ha afectado la salud y la vida, sino también ha triplicado la inseguridad alimentaria en nuestro hemisferio y ha provocado que más de 13 millones de personas caigan por debajo del umbral de la pobreza, a la vez que ha develado las grandes carencias en nuestros sistemas de salud y educación. Necesitamos una respuesta conjunta. Nuestro desafío es contener no solo la enfermedad, sino también las consecuencias económicas y sociales de esta crisis. Al mismo tiempo, no debemos perder de vista que hay una agenda pendiente en materia de lucha contra la corrupción y la defensa de la democracia y el fortalecimiento de la gobernabilidad. Además de la pandemia de la COVID-19, encaramos otra que es la pandemia de la desigualdad. Tenemos que construir sociedades más justas, inclusivas, democráticas, en las cuales se garanticen las libertades y derechos de todos los ciudadanos. Soy maestro de escuela rural, además de agricultor, he sentido en carne propia la falta de oportunidades que subsiste en nuestro continente. Por ello, desde el primer día que hemos asumido este gobierno, he propuesto generar en el país un cambio social con estabilidad, crecimiento económico y una redistribución equitativa de los beneficios. Para ello, se necesita del concurso de todos los actores de la sociedad, especialmente el sector privado, en un clima de gobernabilidad, de diálogo y de respeto. Las proyecciones de diversas instituciones señalan que en el Perú tendrán el mayor crecimiento en la región para este año, gracias a la rápida recuperación de nuestra economía y al ambiente favorable que prevalece en el Perú para concretar negocios e invertir en diferentes sectores. Como lo señalé en mi reciente presentación en las Naciones Unidas, y hoy lo ratifico, el Perú tiene plena apertura para atraer inversiones que garanticen el respeto al medio ambiente, mejoren la calidad y el nivel de empleo e impulsen la transferencia de tecnología, proporcionando beneficios concretos a todos los ciudadanos. En aquella oportunidad, muchas empresas aceptaron la cordial invitación de mi gobierno para visitar nuestro país en fecha próxima, con el objetivo de incentivar inversiones en todo el territorio nacional. Quiero también hacer extensiva esta invitación a todos ustedes. Es un momento propicio para consolidar los fuertes lazos de amistad y cooperación con los Estados Unidos. Nos asiste no solo nueva oportunidad, nuestra voluntad además política y los estrechos lazos económicos, comerciales que compartimos, también está la presencia de casi 1 millón de peruanos que ha elegido a este país como su segundo hogar, así como el Tratado de Libre Comercio y otros instrumentos destinados a promover la cooperación y las inversiones. Por ello, desde mi gobierno trabajaremos por seguir propiciando estos diálogos con el sector privado que permitan identificar oportunidades de comercio e inversión en ambos países, con miras a sumar esfuerzos para consolidar la recuperación de la economía, la lucha contra la pandemia, la protección del medio ambiente, así como garantizar la igualdad de oportunidades para todos. Muchas gracias.
Here to close the program is our chair, Luis Laguerre. Luis, thank you so much for your leadership, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you all for joining us today. I am Luis Laguerre, Chair of the Association of American Chambers of Commerce in Latin America and the Caribbean, ACLA. On behalf of ACLA, it is my honor to help bring to a close a very productive 2021 forecast on Latin America and the Caribbean Conference. I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to all of our distinguished speakers that participated in today and yesterday's sessions. We thank you for your contributions to our examination of the trade and investment agenda, our path towards economic recovery, what's next in the digital transformation, and opportunities to build a more competitive region positioned for sustainable and inclusive growth. We were fortunate to hear from government officials, business executives, policymakers, and thought leaders. One common theme highlighted throughout the conference was the importance of partnerships. Strong partnerships between the business community and governments, and between the United States and the nations of Latin America and the Caribbean. Promoting trade and investment is at the heart of ACLA's mission and our collective work as AmChams, in partnership with the U.S. Chamber. Yesterday, Myron Brilliant mentioned the upcoming Summit of the Americas, slated for early summer 2022, as an opportunity for the region. ACLA has an important role to play by advocating for policies that strengthen the rule of law, promote and facilitate trade, foster innovation, leverage digitalization, revitalize healthcare systems that endorse economic recovery and sustainable and inclusive growth. The strength of ACLA lies in its members and partners. Once again, I would like to extend our thanks to our AmCham leaders and the Shares Leadership Circle companies, and a special thank you to the ACLA Secretariat staff at the U.S. Chamber. We invite you to stay engaged in the ACLA network and our program of work. Thank you again.